So when I sat down to watch it, you know, I think like everybody else, it's now what is the comparison between Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings? And you called it out absolutely perfectly, and it was in the presentation of what the world is wanting to be, where R. Martin is the corrupt political bloodshed for
Yep.
power. Uh, Tolkien is the idealistic, flowery, good versus evil. Are you going to disturb utopia, or what is
Yeah,
truly
yeah, yeah.
utopia in this
Yeah, yeah.
sense? And I think in that show, it hit me. They kind of smacked it right at the beginning, just in the conversation, in the writing, in the speech writing. It was just
Mm.
like all it is just poetry. And for
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
initially, it was kind of annoying because I was just like, okay, like, can you talk normal? I know you're elves, but can you talk normal?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But as it continued proceeding on, and of course being able to center around Gadriel a little
Mm.
bit, who I think people are gonna keep trying to push her as a Mary Sue in the same way of like a Mulan, or I'm not even gonna say Ray, but like a Mulan,
Yeah.
or the live action version or something to that effect, where she like has all the powers. I'm like, no, this makes sense. She's actually got a real struggle, which is the Batman concept. I need to avenge. I need to
Mm.
fight this darkness that is, I feel, is perpetually there, and I needed to justify my existence.
Yeah.
So once so all her abilities was great. I'm like, yeah, she's an elf. You also take it from like Orlando Bloom's character.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Yep.
there was little surprise to me as to like how good she could be, because we already assumed that there it was. But I think whenever they circled around with her, it made it more interesting as to how the world kind of comes together. Because
Mm.
despite all the flowery language, it now kind of, you know, dis- filters through the types of the characters. And so how it built the rest of the world, where it's like everybody's kind of in this limbo piece, and the
Mm.
time change, which I think is purposeful, like because we're looking at it a little bit from the perspective of the elves, is not consistent. So it's
Mm.
like how much time has gone that people have really forgotten. Is it 150 years? Is it 3,000
Oh
years?
man.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's so much, and I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
understand how people would not have the same feelings. Like if you're a dwarf, if your average life expectancy
Mm.
is like 60 years old, 60 years, or 40
Yeah.
years, as he kind of referenced in episode 2, then of course, like, this is so long past to go. Or the half foots, which I have to assume don't have that much longer of a lifespan. And then
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
like human element, where you got the history books, but the elves are forever petty on the
Yeah,
humans,
yeah.
siding their siding. So it's like, what is going on? But I think these first 2 episodes really gave a little bit of sprinkle into world building, and it kind of reminded me of, again, Game of Thrones, the first
Yes.
first one, and how much the first 4 episodes were really needed, even though they threw things that kind of caught at the end. But I think this is why Amazon was good to put 1 and 2 out
Right.
at the same time, because you needed to have like that continuation, so that episode 2 was the drop versus
Yep.
this big guy who clearly is Sauron. Like, this guy is clearly Sauron.
So which guy are you talking about there? You talking about
Giant. The giant who's not really giant. The guy who can't talk. He talks in sounds, and that was
right, right,
girl.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
he's clearly Sauron
Are you
forgotten.
sure?
I feel so confident that he is in either he's
Because
not Saruman known. Like, I think that's the thing. Like, because Saruman had the mask and everything like that, so nobody knows.
yeah, no one knows
Yeah,
what he looks like. So you don't think it's so you're talking about the hairy guy who came out of the sky, landed in that
yeah,
comet.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I thought the guy on the boat is the more likely because he just seems a bit too smooth for my liking. He just seems a bit, charming, and it's like, oh, I can see what's going on here. Anyway,
Hmm.
but I'm not completely sold on that. I I thought I thought episode 2 was better than episode 1, and
Yeah.
And I think for me, there was a couple of potential problems with it that could potentially make it hard for me anyway to struggle through it. And that is going back to what you mentioned before was Galadriel. When you're entering a whole new world, when you're doing some serious world building, whether it's in Star Wars, or whether it's Harry Potter, or whether it's Game of Thrones, you need that kind of character to bring you through that world, right?
Right.
And you need a character you can relate to and you can like on a really down-to-earth level, so that when you come across all this fantastical stuff, they're kind of leading you through it. And so, Harry Potter's a great example. He's a kid. He's got dreams like you and I do. And all of a sudden, he goes to school, and then you see that. So you go to the train station, you see, he experiences it, you experience it. He goes to the school, he experiences, you experience. You go, You need a really down-to-earth character that you can relate to take you into a whole new world, even after all the montages in the first 5 minutes, whatever. Galadriel and elves as a whole, I struggle to relate. Yeah. They're superhuman. They're pale. They've got pointy ears. And even though she's on about that revenge thing, which is, that vintage motivation for so many characters and so many stories, I didn't even get to think I understood her brother all that well. I'd not enough time with them, at least. I didn't quite, they're hard people to relate to because they live on such a angelic level that is so different from us. And you mentioned one of those reasons is they live for bloody ages.
Yeah.
And I found that I got more into it. And just to continue that point, and Elrond doesn't help either. Like, those other guys aren't all that crash hot. When we got to the half feet, again, getting closer to Tolkien's
that ground level
hobbits, then I started becoming engaged. And in the second episode, it was when they finally met the dwarfs. You had that dwarf couple. Then I was on board, right? I love that exchange. And I was not only on board with the funny dwarfs, I was right on board with Elrond as well, as he interacted.
Right.
But until then, not only was Galadriel hard for me to connect with as a character, but, I said to you just before that, a character usually takes you through this world. So what they experience, you experience. This one kind of departed from that a little bit. And suddenly you're over here and you've got that elf that loves that human chick. Like, he looks like he's the French Foreign Legion. And then you're over here. And then you're over here. And there's nothing. Maybe it's the fact that they all look up and see the comet landing. But it just felt jumpy.
It's disconnected.
Yeah. Jumping. And it just didn't. It just felt like a lot of dumping of information. And not a lot of charm in that first episode. Again, the second one, okay, now we've got this guy coming out, the hairy guy. Could be Sauron, could be not. But we see a little bit of interaction there. We see Elrond with the dwarfs. We start seeing stuff beginning to happen. But again, it's a little bit fractured for me. Again, I'm not, that character I mentioned from the French Foreign Legion. Serious. A lot of these characters are really serious and dry, and I'm struggling to connect with them. And I just hope that from this point on that they just kind of bring some of these streams together, particularly focusing on those characters which are highly relatable, which are, at this point for me anyway, the dwarfs
and
the half feet. Because Galadriel is like, she reminds me of an Obi-Wan Kenobi chick. What was her name?
You're talking about the third sister chick, right?
Yeah, the third is like, I'm just angry. I'm just angry. Come on, man. Go get drunk. Go get laid. Have a good time. Like, stop being. But you know what I mean? Like, you can't be just angry and want revenge. And the other problem with that, in my opinion, is that she's after Sauron, and we all know she ain't gonna get there, right? She ain't going to get there. It's, again, a bit like that last episode of Obi-Wan where she's chasing down Luke Skywalker. well, it's kind of interesting, but we all know that's not going to
what the
happen.
outcome is going to be.
So she's going to be chasing Sauron to the end of the earth, and we all know that she's chasing a tail. She might
Right.
meet him and have a good exchange, and she might learn something and grow. But just from a pure plot point of view, we all know he's going to end up on top, because if he's not, there's no Lord of the Rings. So anyway, that's my concerns. My concerns is just that, just these just getting to know these characters well, getting to know the ones we relate to well, and letting them take us through this really complex. So I'm still not exactly sure what happened with the trees. There's lots of, probably with you too, probably just a whole heap of, huh? And it's funny how much you can forgive that stuff when you're having a good time. And you go back and rewatch, and you can find out about that stuff.
But I guess I see what you're saying. I do think that to some extent that they're trying to give us a wider perspective than what we got from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, because I think it was for that exact same thing why we followed through with The Hobbit so much, because of the fact that we needed that grounded element to be able to navigate through this world. What I do like about this one, though, is is that we get a bit more expansion on some of these other sides. For example, like utilizing the elves. We always knew they're ethereal, always knew kind of serious, but to the extent of what their claim was, because like with the Gadriel thing, I think that first part of even though it was kind of weird, that first part of episode 1, whatever, is her making the origami boat, and then the kids like trying to sink it. It gave us an idea of trying to create the outcast element for her. So I feel like you utilize a third sister as this comparison. I feel like at least in this one, I at least understand what her motivations were to begin with, and they don't feel crazy, even if they're really they're exaggerated, but they don't feel crazy. Like third sister was just like, yo, you are angry, and I do not understand the level of anger that you have right now for this. It doesn't make sense to you what we reveal. But at least with this, it was like, initially it was just, I want to be able to defeat the evils because she's an elf and that's what she wants. And she wants to protect with her brother. And then her brother gets killed by Sauron. And now it's the quest for vengeance. And then the war ends. And it's like, I still don't feel like this person is done. And now we're in this balance of, are you obsessed or are you dedicated? And at what cost? So at least I can feel like there was something there. And so at least it gives me a better look at versus the other side of it with Elrond, where you get I think the more quote, quote, down to earth version of it. Because initially I thought he was going to be terrible. And it wasn't until the second episode with the dwarves where I was like, maybe he's not going to be terrible. But
no, that was good. Yeah,
he was good, right? But it was just like, okay, I want to get the aspect of how these elves work, and then now we get this High King component of it where we never. I mean, we did a little bit because I think that was Agent Smith guy. I forgot his name.
Hugo Weaving.
Hugo Weaving's character, the High King in this.
From Nigeria.
From Nigeria, from Kano, Nigeria. But I think it gave me a better idea of something that I didn't get from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, which was like what their end game is and everything. Like the moving into the other realm. Like whenever Frodo did it in the movie, in the 16 different endings that we got for the last Lord of the Rings, I was like, did he really go to a heaven was this a metaphor?
Yeah, well, that's a fascinating one, because I think, and there are a lot of ultra nerdy Tolkien fans out there really angry about this. And one of the things they're probably angry about is the fact that Tolkien left that very, very obscure.
Yeah.
Like he left that. And now that you're right, they've made it more concrete. There's a boat. There's the clouds. A goes to B.
Just and it opens up to this. Exactly. You open up, you go through, and clearly it has a timed limit, or I don't know what's the effect of what allows it to open versus what doesn't. But if you go over there, you're not coming back. There's no return back over here. But the fact that you can refuse to go to it is wild.
She jumped in the water.
She jumped in the water in the middle of the ocean.
Yep. So let's see what happens. They've set things up nicely. They've done the hard work. It looks $1 zillion because it was $1 zillion.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon definitely has got to get their money's worth because between these NFL rights and this, they're spending.
Well, I mean, I'm curious. I'm very, very curious to see. Very curious to note that there was no star in this movie that I recognized. I didn't see a single face there I knew, and that's. That I mean, you look at the original movies. Then you look at things like Game of Thrones, and you see semi-familiar faces. There's Sean Bean in the Game of Thrones, right. And then you've got Elijah Wood. You know him. He's not A-lister, but you know him.
He's familiar.
And this time, they've just dumped all familiarity and said, "You better get to know these guys." That's obviously where they're trying to save the money.
Let's remind our friends to please click on the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you know when we have new videos out.
Subscribe!
Double down or die.